I never imagined when I attended the first Intersex conference last August that less than a year later we'd be sitting up here doing this panel as a gay and lesbian film festival, and I'm thrilled. And I think it's a testament to all the work that ISNA has been doing over the past few years, and all the work that we intersex members of ISNA have been doing on this journey toward self-realization and public education. ISNA was founded by Cheryl Chase in August of 1993 as a very brave effort to meet with other intersex people, to come to a place, create a safe space for intersex people to create specifically intersex identity and share their experiences, and also to improve the treatment of intersex infants, adolescents, and their families and loved ones, and adults, I should add to that too. I feel weird holding two mics. It's kind of appropriate. In the past year have I been involved with ISNA, and all I have to say is that it's changed my life. As you heard in the film, which basically speaks for itself, I fortunately didn't get any medical intervention. I know they wanted to give me estrogen therapy at about 11, right after I started menstruating. And fortunately, my mom objected. Thank you, Mom. And I didn't get anything, was allowed to mature. And over the years, I was aware of a difference, but I was completely isolated in that difference. I felt like someone who knew something was different, and everyone around me was pretending it wasn't. And when I finally, one interesting story about that is I had a girlfriend in '92 who was interning as a gynecologist, and so I asked her to tell me if she ever saw any female with a body like mine. And over the years, we're still very good friends. Over the years, her answer was consistently no. And as I thought about this panel, and I thought about why I, as an adult, did not know, had never heard the word intersexed, and this gynecologist had never heard the word intersexed, the terrible tragedy dawned on me that the reason is because people didn't want us to know. And when I found out the truth, it was not only overwhelming, but incredibly tragic and difficult to cope with. The truth that since the 1950s, genital mutilation has been occurring to male and females whose bodies do not conform to medically defined standards of gender. And this is why we don't know, and this is why I'm so thrilled that this film is showing, and was thrilled to become a member of ISNA and work with ISNA, and I'm going to let everybody else just take it from there.
All right, our two other panelists, Suji Tamar Mattis to my left, and Cheryl Chase of ISNA. I just want to say briefly, one of the reasons I wanted to moderate this panel is that I've known Suji quite well because we live in the same household for the last few years. But also Cheryl is somebody that I've known through doing political work on gender issues since the early 1990s, and I've been really amazed at how the intersex story has really gotten a lot of publicity. I've been honored in the way that intersexual activists have worked with transgender and transsexual activists, because I see the intersex and transsexual stuff as sort of being the flip sides of the same coin. But on the one hand, intersex people are having surgery imposed on them to make them normal, and transsexuals are being denied surgery in order to sort of keep them normal. There's kind of a freakishness to nature, to identity, to bodies that is being invisibilized. It's really the same sort of issues. So I think that the main issue is the issue of consent, of allowing people to do with their bodies what they feel like they need to do with their bodies, to leave it alone or change it in the ways that make you feel comfortable. So that's why I've been so pleased, to work with my intersexual allies. Who would like to go first, Suji or Cheryl? Okay, Suji.
You saw me getting married in that. And actually, I also want to say that I never was medically intervened upon either, and I'm extremely grateful for that. And I just think it's just, I mean, I remember I went to my first ISNA meeting and I realized that, there was this incredible genocide going on against intersexuals, and everybody in that meeting had surgeries imposed upon them. It was a really, it really catalyzed my desire to start being vocal and to come out as an intersexual, and to, my silence wasn't going to keep me safe. It wasn't going to keep all the intersex babies who were being born safe either. So that's why I definitely started coming out.
People in other times and other cultures have been much more aware of transgendered and intersex people. That includes our own culture. And before 100 years ago, intersex people were, it was not commonly known in European culture that lots of people were intersex. They're mentioned in all the legal codes, etc. I think that we're just now seeing the beginning of the breaking of this medical monopoly on who gets to label and attribute meaning to what differences in sex and gender mean. And what you're seeing is people rebelling against having been stuffed into boxes and physically mutilated by medicine for the purposes of enforcing conformity.
The question is, what would you recommend a service provider, medical service provider, do when an intersex child comes to their attention?
I would recommend, like one of the women in the film, that if there were any physical danger, that was dealt with appropriately, but otherwise that no cosmetic surgery, and it truly is cosmetic surgery, be performed on the child unless they themselves, at reaching adulthood or an age where they were cognizant enough to make the decision, wanted that. That's what I would recommend, and I know that raises a lot of questions as well, and people are welcome to ask those. I just want to add that one of the things that's been incredibly healing for us is to meet other people like us. And now that there are peer support groups available, it's important for providers to emphasize that parents need to be introduced to other parents, and intersex people need to be introduced to other intersex people and families.
Yeah, I wanted to say something, especially being a parent now myself. I think people really have to realize that even if you have a baby that has genitals that look like one gender or the other, you have no guarantee that that baby's going to grow up and stay in the gender that you assign it at birth. And I think people have to realize that, and that there's a lot of different possibilities in gender, and when you're dealing with a baby who's intersex, you can, of course, in this society, there is no non-gendered pronoun, there is no third gender, and until that can happen, which is going to take a while, you have to pick something that you have to make an arbitrary decision, and decide all these different things, and then you have to make sure that the child knows, okay, yeah, you are different, like in the I am who I feel I am, it's like, yeah, so what, I'm different, okay, whatever, and you have to realize that, okay, maybe that's going to change at puberty, or maybe, you might want to change that later, and just to let them know, yeah, you're different, but that's okay, and everybody's different in some way, and everybody's going to find something to pick on kids. Kids are always going to pick on each other. It doesn't matter, what it is. There's always going to be something.
I think that the relationship between one's body, one's gender identity, one's gender role, one's sense of self, whatever that, we tend to think about that as being something natural and fixed throughout time. And that what I do think is changing historically is that people are going like, oh, these are all a bunch of different things that get put together as a package. And that package can change over time for individual people. And I think there is a growing cultural awareness that things can be taken apart and put back together in very different ways, according to what's in the best interest of the individual person.
That I think the main problem is that people aren't aware of intersexuality. How many people, maybe in San Francisco, queer community, people know, but about 95% of the people outside that community who I've spoken with about the subject have had to have the word defined. So I think if everyone, society as a whole, was just generally aware that intersexuality existed, it wouldn't be this different thing. It's the medical establishment which has hidden it recently and coerced parents into believing that they need to hide it, and that's creating a problem. If children knew there was male, female, and a whole gradient of intersexuality, there would be nothing freaky to begin with. So that's what we're pushing for, and that's what we believe everyone should push for. I actually want to recall something that Susan said to me that was really valuable.
when she was helping me write an article, a political article. People say that this, to be born intersex or to have different genitals is so freakish that we couldn't possibly leave children alone. We have to continue to do this surgery. We have to keep it secret. This surgery is new. It was only really began to be widely applied in the late 50s. And before 100 years ago, it wasn't doctors who got to say what it meant to be different sexually. And Susan said to me that if we look at the history of how medicine began to take authority to define these conditions and to actually try to eliminate them, we can historicize that process. And if it got made the way that it is today, which is doctors get to eliminate intersex babies, then it can get changed. All we have to do is decide that we as a culture want to change it.
I saw in the video, I was assigned female, which was a pretty arbitrary decision, and I changed it legally to male so that we could get married and I could get quick and easy and inexpensive parental rights. But, for me, there is no pronoun that's appropriate. I just don't feel like, he or she is correct. I don't feel like male and female is correct. And, I think that, I've looked at all these different ways people have tried to change pronouns in the language, and I just don't think it's going to happen right now. So I just go by she, and sometimes people call me he. I just couldn't care less. I mean, it's just not, it's like, who cares? I just couldn't care less. There's not a right one. I don't know.
Well, one of my very best friends who's sitting in the audience suggested Z a while ago. So I'll throw that out there. Otherwise, same thing as Suji said.
Every day in the U.S., 5 children have their genitals surgically mutilated because they don't fit the doctor's idea of what a boy and what a girl is supposed to look like. And for me, it's a lot more important to work on that issue than to try to convince the person standing in line next to me what pronoun they should use about me. So she or he or whatever is fine.
Yeah, actually, I also wanted to add really quick that things are changing in a lot of ways. There's an intersex person in San Diego who's actually got the DMV to change. She doesn't have an M or F on her driver's license anymore. She has an I for intersex. So things are beginning to change.
The question, or the comment was someone who has been in a position of actually counseling parents and children who were intersexual, saying that there was not a lot of information available to them as professionals, and are parents involved with ISNA now in sort of changing the way that they deal with their children?
Has the film been shown in medical schools?
Has this film been shown in medical schools? So far, doctors really hate us. There's 2 doctors who support us, who are clinicians who've been actually doing these interventions and who have changed their point of view. But basically, doctors have told us to drop dead. Particularly the doctors who are performing these interventions on intersex children every day have not wanted to talk to us and have not wanted to see our film, read our newsletter, or any of those things. But to answer your first question, we do have some parents in contact with us, and we introduce parents to each other. We introduce them to adults who have conditions similar to their children. And we're not the only intersex support group. There are actually 2 other support groups in the U.S. that are run by and focused on parents, and we make introductions to those groups, and we do some things together with those groups sometimes. One of the reasons that's useful is that parents find us, they tend to find us very threatening because we're angry and we tend to be queer, and they don't want their children to be queer. One of the reasons the surgery is done is because they're afraid their children will grow up to be queer. Doctors encourage them to do the surgery to make certain their child will be heterosexual. In our experience, that doesn't work very well. But it's a lot less threatening for parents to talk to other parents than it is for them to talk to adult intersex people.
Yeah, actually, I've spoken to a lot of people in ISNA who have gone back to try and talk to the places where they had their surgeries done as children, and they refused to talk to them. They refused to give them any information. They didn't want to hear that they existed, and all the files, I believe, we lost the follow-up because they just didn't want to hear about what the adult experience was. There's no scientific evidence or anything or research to back up what the surgeries they're doing. They're absolutely doing this because, well, you saw Dr. John Money himself talk about, his issues with Eve on the inside and Adam on the outside, and all those really wonderful analogies that he bases his medical science on. So, yeah, it's kind of very unfortunate. But we'd love this stuff to show in medical settings.
We actually did start out with the idea that medical people would be very interested to hear from us because they admit that they don't know what the outcome of their interventions is. And we were quite shocked and horrified to find that they didn't want to speak with us. I think that things are just beginning to change. You know, as I said, there are 2 physicians now who are supporting us publicly. Dr. Money, who you saw on one of the earlier films, is supposedly an expert on intersex, and he has been unwilling to speak with us. He's given us written refusals. We attempted to talk with the American Academy of Pediatrics, and they refused to speak with us. They issued a statement that said they're going to keep doing what they've been doing and they won't talk with us. Surgeons have denounced us in the media as zealots, and insist that all of their patients are happy, but they never hear from them. So we're ready. We're very much ready and interested in speaking to medical professional gatherings, and we did manage to speak with the American Academy, the American Psychiatric Association, just a month or 6 weeks ago. The mental health professionals are a lot easier to talk to because it's obvious that this kind of physical mutilation accompanied with shame and secrecy is not the way to improve anybody's health. But I do think that now that we have a couple of allies inside the medical profession and inside the specialties, that within the next year we'll finally see that they're going to be beginning to let us come and talk to them.
Okay, the question is there any international intersexual advertising or activism going on, and you know what are some of the gains that could come from a more cross-cultural, multicultural approach? You know, given what we saw in the film today about the Dominican Republic, is there any international intersex activism happening?
We haven't really been networking with any pre-industrial cultures like the Dominican Republic, where people are not medically forced into boxes, and that is an interesting idea to consider. I was really glad to see the Dominican Republic people in the film tonight because they're written about a lot by medical people, and it's the first time that I've gotten a chance to hear them speak about themselves. But you know, because they are not pathologized in the same way, I think that it's less likely for them to draw a political analogy and to form a political movement. But there are intersex activist groups in other industrialized cultures. There are 2 groups in Germany. There's a group in the UK, and there's a group in Japan, and we are in contact with all of them. And we have an office in New Zealand. Our sister group, started by Mani, who you saw in the film, is the Intersex Society of New Zealand.